At 10:23 a.m. in the South China Sea, a Chinese destroyer accelerates as if intending to collide, determined to test whether the US will actually defend these waters or just claim them in words. The USS Princeton is on a freedom of navigation mission when its radar suddenly detects something that could spark an international conflict. At 108 nautical miles out, a Chinese Type 0052D destroyer jumps from 18 to 30 knots in less than 60 seconds, moving with the urgency of a ship meant to signal that these waters already have an owner. The reason becomes clear quickly. The ship's captain had just received direct orders from Beijing. The instructions were explicit: approach and gauge the US reaction. The scenario couldn't be more delicate. About 180 nautical miles from the nearest Chinese territory in international waters, right through a corridor that sees $3.4 billion in annual trade, including shipments critical to Taiwan's economy. The Nimitz Carrier Strike Group proceeds as if everything is under control. They've spent decades protecting these routes, and in a way, ensuring millions worldwide can keep buying massive TVs to watch shows about warriors they would never want to become. At 10:26 a.m., the threat report is simple but chilling. The threat level is medium-high. On the screens, the enemy ship appears with unnerving clarity. The USS Princeton's radar traces its silhouette with such precision that the lines of its antennas and vertical launchers are visible. It's like looking through a telescope, without the other side knowing they're being observed. The calculations are cold and precise. At its current speed, the Type 052D will cross the engagement line in 18 minutes, and if it fires, its YJ-18 missiles will cover the last few nautical miles in under 4 minutes. There will be no time for speeches or news updates. But the Princeton is no defenseless spectator. Its 122 vertical launch cells hold a lethal arsenal, including SM-6 missiles with a range of 1,320 nautical miles. This means the first strike could come from the Princeton long before the Chinese give the order to fire. Every officer watches their screen. Every second is measured. Outside, the sea seems calm, but aboard, the distance between the two ships is measured not just in nautical miles, but in decisions. At 10:29 a.m., the captain requests a direct assessment. What is the destroyer's likely intent? The answer is clear. At its current course and speed, it will be within weapons range in 14 minutes. The combat officer recommends maximum alert, but the captain remains calm. He observes, gauges the situation, and responds with a steadiness that is both unsettling and reassuring. Let's see how far they're willing to go before making a mistake. Outside, the sea is far from empty. Within 50 nautical miles, 46 merchant vessels move. A Singapore-flagged container ship carrying semiconductors, a British vessel with $200 million in natural gas, and dozens more relying on the US Navy for safe passage. If China tries to turn these international waters into its private pool, all this traffic would be exposed. But doing that would require an action neither side dares: direct combat. On the USS Princeton, heading, speed, and Chinese movements are continuously tracked. At the center, the USS Nimitz, displacing 106,300 tons with 90 aircraft aboard, coordinates launches with millimeter precision. The destroyers USS Changhoon and USS Kidd reposition to form a protective ring around the carrier, reinforcing defense against any attack vector. At 25,000 feet, an E-2D Hawkeye monitors the theater with a 348 nautical mile radar range. Its screens show multiple launches from the Chinese carrier Shandong. Radar signatures correspond to J-15s ascending south. 1 minute later, Princeton sonar operators detect a steady, deep echo, a Type 039 diesel-electric submarine at 80 nautical miles. But it's not the silent predator it should be. Its metallic sounds resonate like heavy machinery, as if announcing its position. In the underwater world, this is not a minor mistake. It's a death sentence. With this detection, the picture is complete. Surface, air, and undersea units are all deployed for a show of force. At 10:37 a.m., the USS Nimitz's air wing executes a flawless launch choreography. FA-18 Super Hornets take off one by one, 45 seconds apart. From the catapults, hydraulic pistons stretch like iron muscles, launching each plane toward the horizon. Crew members in color-coded uniforms move between planes with fuel ignited. Hand signals coordinate tons of metal just inches apart. Each Super Hornet launches fully fueled and armed, thanks to electromagnetic catapults, without sacrificing range or firepower. The first squad of FA-18E Super Hornets ascends to 15,000 feet, and before reaching this altitude, their AN/APG-79 radars lock onto enemy J-15s at maximum range. Hornet radar, with thousands of transmit-receive modules, can track dozens of targets simultaneously with high precision. By contrast, J-15 radar uses mechanically scanned arrays, sweeping space slowly and predictably, making them easy to detect. The Chinese jets continue climbing, but the maneuver is demanding. The Shandong, lacking catapults, launches via ski jump ramp, forcing reduced fuel and armament. While gaining altitude, they also burn reserves needed for combat. The Hornets, in contrast, launch at full combat weight, full fuel, and full armament, with flexibility to choose when and how to engage. But the advantage is more than just apparent weight. The real difference is in the network. Each FA-18 is connected via Link 16, sharing all sensor data in real time. If one sees something, all see it. The Chinese pilots rely on their instruments and voice comms, putting them at a tactical disadvantage. It's like entering a fight against a coordinated system blindfolded. In the sky, superiority is measured not in years of development, but decades. CA-18G Growlers appear without firing a single missile. These electronic warfare specialists carry ALQ-99 pods, capable of jamming enemy systems over 86 nautical miles. As they establish interference orbits, Chinese communications begin breaking up. On J-15 radar screens, ghost contacts multiply. In an instant, 4 US units appeared on the screens. A second later, 12. Then 20. Signals flickered and vanished. Radar blocks disappeared, only to reappear elsewhere. The Chinese pilots tried to track real aircraft but ended up chasing illusions, while the real threats maneuvered outside their view. At that moment, the US formation deployed a tactic perfected over decades, known as the Wall. It was a multi-layered defensive system, a high line at 35,000 feet, a middle layer at 25,000 feet, and a lower layer at 15,000 feet. These layers created overlapping interception zones with mutual support, leaving no escape routes for the adversary without entering missile range. The Chinese formation remained clustered. Above them, an RC-135B rivet joint patrolled for over 6 hours, gathering data on Chinese electronic activity. Its mission was methodical, record and classify every signal from the Chinese systems. Inside, Mandarin interpreters worked non-stop. Among intercepted transmissions, one stood out. Chinese pilots were requesting permission for aggressive maneuvers, asking to approach US ships. By the time Beijing could give the green light, the situation could have changed 3 times. Meanwhile, the USS Princeton continued its patrol. Its defense systems tracked every contact with clockwork precision. The SPY radar, capable of detecting objects the size of a soccer ball over 143 nautical miles, displayed the Chinese destroyer with brutal clarity. Firing solutions updated in real time, list after list, ready to execute at any moment. At 10:47 a.m., the Chinese destroyer did exactly what any other navy would consider an intolerable provocation. Its Type 346A ASA radar stopped sweeping the sea for targets and locked a fire control track directly on the USS Princeton. In naval terms, it was as if the ship had pointed a loaded gun. In the Combat Information Center, the US crew reacted immediately, but not impulsively. The crew had drilled these scenarios countless times. Each operator knew their role perfectly. The Chinese were betting that US caution would prevent any response, mistaking calm for weakness. Princeton kept its own fire control radars on standby, while beneath the deck, 122 vertical launch cells housed SM-6 missiles, with a range of over 130 nautical miles, and SM-2s in surface mode, ready to strike. Any aggression would have turned the Chinese destroyer into an artificial reef within minutes. Firing solutions recalculated continuously from multiple angles, leaving the target no margin for survival if the situation escalated. Above, a J-15 broke formation as if in a personal duel. It dove toward a US FA-18, passing so close that the roar felt like a solid blow to the cockpit. It wasn't a salute, it was intimidation. The American pilot reacted with steady hands, rolling the aircraft perfectly and snapping the stick, placing himself directly on the Chinese jet's 6 o'clock. For 3 eternal seconds, he had a perfect firing solution. On his helmet-mounted display, the J-15's engines glowed infrared red, like 2 ignited weapons. A simple trigger pull on an AIM-9X Sidewinder would have turned the enemy jet into a fireball. But the escalation peaked when a submarine decided to enter the scene. A Type 09 diesel-electric crept forward, hidden below the thermocline to avoid sonar detection. The move seemed calculated until the E-2 Hawkeye detected it. Submarine contact, bearing 159, distance 7.4 nautical miles. Classification, likely type 039. Its acoustic signature was already cataloged, its position calculated to the centimeter. If the situation escalated, the USS Princeton would have only 12 seconds to react before an anti-submarine missile with encapsulated torpedo could turn the ship into an improvised wreck. Open fire, and no one survives. Meanwhile, from the USS Nimitz, 48 aircraft launched one after another like arrows, the largest aerial demonstration from a single carrier in years. Super Hornets, fully armed, catapulted from the deck. EA-18G Growlers carried electronic warfare pods capable of blanketing an entire city in electromagnetic blackout. E-2D Hawkeyes ascended to the high point of the electronic battlefield, overseeing and controlling everything. The Growlers struck first without firing a single missile. Their ALQ-99 pods, operating at full power, flooded the electromagnetic spectrum. On Chinese radar screens, the images distorted into chaos. Hundreds of ghost contacts appeared and vanished. Just as the air confusion seemed insurmountable, the most psychological strike arrived. A Virginia-class attack submarine, which had been tracking the Chinese formation for 8 days, decided to reveal itself. Silent, invisible, patient, it had been there all along. At 4:47 p.m., it surfaced just 6 nautical miles from the Chinese destroyer, close enough for the Chinese watchstanders to see its black hull in broad daylight. 8 days of anti-submarine operations had failed to detect the 7,900 tons of steel moving beneath them. If this had been wartime, the Chinese carrier would already be scrap at the bottom of the sea. The submarine's surfacing was deliberate. It rose like a bird, breaking the surface, water cascading down its hull shimmering in the afternoon sun. Chinese ship cameras captured every detail, every drop, every centimeter of this calculated provocation. 90 seconds later, enough time to be seen, photographed, and reported, it submerged silently. The message had been delivered without ambiguity. Above, the Super Hornets continued their lethal dance, drawing perfect spirals in a sky where each turn meant life or death. The J-15s, pushed to their limits, saw fuel reserves plummet with every desperate maneuver. It was like watching marathon runners trying to match sprinters. Each turn pushed them closer to exhaustion. One by one, the Chinese units broke contact, not by choice, but necessity. They returned to the Shandong carrier, tanks nearly empty, some warning lights glowing. Their engine noise faded into the distance, replaced by a silence heavier than any explosion. On the horizon, the U.S. carrier strike group maintained formation, unshaken. The sea returned to calm, but the air retained a metallic taste, the lingering tension of a storm that hadn't yet passed. As the sun sank over the South China Sea, a warning impossible to ignore remained clear.